He had the free shot, but it didn't drop. What an excellent pass from Davis. Top pass. Straight down to Al Green, who finds himself in a position of having to shoot the thing. He goes right underneath. Leroy's pretty confident he can take it. And there it is again. Bullets with the ball. Leroy Logan. Hook shot. Oh! Here, Leroy will take it. Yes! Leroy out of the game. The clock doesn't start until the ball is in play, and they've blown it. A turnover, and that is the ball game. The Bullets have lost by just 2 points in extra time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is NBL Rewind. Liam Santamaria, myself, Cam Luke, and if you've just watched the game, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, NBL TV, Facebook, you would have just watched Game 1 of the 1986 NBL Grand Final series between the Adelaide 36ers, the minor premiers, against the third-placed, but won a couple of elimination finals to get to the Grand Final series, the Brisbane Bullets. Plenty to get into. Hashtag NBL Rewind. Liam, this is fun for about a million different reasons in what, it must be said, was a fairly historic NBL season as well in 86.
Yeah, it was fun to go back and watch this team, the Invincibles, often spoken about as one of, if not the best NBL team of all time, and up against the defending champs, the Bullets. And I think this, as a series, we're just focusing on Game 1, but as a series, this one's a little underrated in terms of the best series of all time. First time the NBL played the Grand Final as a series. Went the distance, the full 3 games, ebbs and flows along the way, and it tipped off with this overtime classic. Also,
the last time, I reckon you might have went with this later, but Perth Wildcats didn't make the playoffs. Historic.
The Cal Bruton influence changed that the very next year.
It was a remarkable game, and you talk about this. I probably should save this for Beyond the Box Score, but just to give a little bit of an idea going in, Adelaide lost 2 games for the entire season, both on the buzzer. Both on the buzzer. So they were 2 losses down for the year. They won a semi-final game. They had a first finals week bye, first round bye. Finals game, semi, home, got the win done, and then obviously had to play an away game to kickstart this NBL Grand Final series. And it was a rematch of the year before. Brisbane, the defending champions, had knocked Adelaide off in a one-off Grand Final as it was in 1985. So you had the rivalry, you had, and what is good, first thoughts, these 2 teams were stacked, Liam Santamaria. Absolutely stacked. And not just on the actual court, but also with Brian Curl and Kenny Cole patrolling the sidelines as well. We've got Hall of Famers, we've got legends, we've got people still visible in the NBL community today who did their thing back in the mid-'80s, in particular this game and series.
And I mean, you mentioned that they went down, that there was a rematch of the previous Grand Final in 85. This was a revenge season for the Adelaide 36ers because you go back that year before, they smacked the Newcastle Falcons by like 50 in the semifinals, marched into the Grand Final expecting to take care of business. And not only did they go down to Leroy and his crew, they got belted 25, 26 points. And there is a story that goes around about how Ken Cole got the whole team to the back of the bus on the way to the airport. And they had a meeting where they basically made a pact never to get embarrassed like that again and to come back the next year. He said, I want you all back and we're going to rip through the competition. And you had Al Green sitting there thinking, hold on, I'm supposed to be running at the Commonwealth Games. I wasn't certain I was going to be back, but they all came back and, as you say, almost went close to going undefeated throughout the year and then stealing this one on the road in Brisbane.
We're going to get to some commentary later, but just the fact is that, and there was a quote, I think, from Ken Cole who said, we expect to win. Brisbane only hope they win. And remarkably, another thing that really struck me early, this stacked Brisbane team, Leroy Loggins was the MVP. They were the reigning champions, of course. Cal Bruton, who came off the bench, had a slight ankle injury going in, but still played a lot and was fairly influential in this game. They were really, Larry Senstein, they were a stacked Brisbane team, John Dorge, and they were unbelievable underdogs. which gives you an indication of how good this Adelaide team was in this particular year. Because if you looked at the lineups, you could see this would be a game that turns out in the series it ends up to be relatively close. But the way the commentary team was talking and the feeling around leading into that series is that Brisbane were just incredible underdogs. And that's another thing that strikes me so interestingly, because they were a stacked team in their own right.
How was Cal Bruton coming off the bench?
Now,
come on now. We need to talk about this because
yeah,
I'm a big fan of Ronnie the Rat.
Yes, and he was good this game.
He was good.
Mm-hmm.
Bruton's a microwave off that bench, an absolute game changer.
Mm-hmm.
In game 2, he came out and had 38.
Huge.
When they got that win. He posted on Facebook recently. Obviously, he had a fallout with Brian Curl following this year.
Yeah.
Very public spat. And then he made his way over to Perth and made his legacy grow even further over there. But he posted on Facebook recently about game 3 saying, I wish I had been able to start. Maybe the result of this series might have been different because when he comes into the game, like everything changes. And he just comes in straight away, bucket, the Bullets get rolling.
You know what he did do? 4.6 seconds it took him to come onto the court and take that first shot, which he nailed, as you touched on. And he started the third quarter. They're 11 down at halftime. He starts the third quarter. Leroy Loggins was remarkable in the third quarter. In fact, the entire game.
We need to
get
back to that.
Bruton out there, and it's not dissimilar to what we see a little bit with Bryce Cotton and Tariq White. Much different players, but having someone else out there who can put heat on the rim and is a superstar Hall of Famer like Cal Bruton was, releases the pressure of Leroy Loggins a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you look at the start of this game, Leroy, they were pumping it into John Dodge fairly early and trying to make him a small focal point. But having Cal Bruton out there made life easier, or seemed to, from the outside for Leroy.
It felt like maybe a little bit of a sort of a Mellow Trimble type of vibe setup. Where, because Bruton obviously is a scorer, right? Like, first and foremost, he wants to push it, shoot it, make plays. But I feel like there was, like you say, there was some chemistry between him and Leroy. Obviously, the two names on the MVP trophy, or the championship trophy for the preseason competition these days, memorialized in that way. But feels like maybe he should have just been on at the start. There was even comment, I got it written down here, from the commentary team saying the Bullets have been suspect as a starting team a number of times. So amazing that he wasn't starting. But you talk about Leroy. Talk about first thoughts. I mean, it was great watching this team. Bill Woods, Mark Davis, the Twin Towers, how dominant they were. My biggest takeaway was just how spectacularly awesome Leroy Loggins was in this game, but over the course of his career. I feel like most NBL fans don't know exactly how good Leroy was, right? 3-time MVP, 3-time champ, 9-time All-NBL first team, dominated the 80s in this league. And I think watching this game, a good opportunity for people to just see how big time he was. Absolute superstar.
You know what we see a lot nowadays in basketball around the world is the up fake, and then you as the offensive player initiating the contact thing into the foul line. That's kind of how he turned the game in the third quarter. Now, he did a lot of that. He was very crafty and smart and intelligent, and we see it all the time now. But he did it in a way in that third quarter. He got to the foul line, which was part of that third quarter run, which essentially was him being able to be, hey, you know what? I got some tough baskets I'm going to have to make, and he made. But he can get some freebies and some cheapies by being intelligent, and he was able to use that up fake and then use the contact to get to the foul line. He was brilliant in this game, as you touched on. His whole career, he was brilliant. And I think the most fun, and I said this last week, in fact, the most fun thing about this is that these guys are still so visible around the community. We see Leroy Loggins, we see Cal Bruton, we've seen both of them with the NBL Blitz when we were down there in Tassie last year. It's Larry Senstock. Like, this is what sporting leagues, and it's harder for an NBL where we have a lot of Americans or imported players come over here, but sporting leagues go to a new level when you're able to look back and see the elder statesmen and women still be around. And I think that's a cool thing of watching some of these games you have, and this one in particular.
Something I want to bring up about Leroy. He has one grand final MVP to his name. One. But he should have 3. Because for a period of time, the first few years of the league, grand final MVP was handed out. And then there was about 4 or 5 seasons, and someone more learned than us will be able to tell us why.
I'm not sure about that.
What?
Well, continue, and I'll tell you my thoughts on it.
The thing wasn't handed out.
I know. So they're not more learned. How do you not give a best on or an MVP for a grand final game?
No, but someone will be able to tell us why. Somebody with more learning will be able to tell us why.
Okay,
but
maybe.
He should have won it in 82.
Yep.
And should have won it in 85,
Mm-hmm.
which would give him 3, which would make Leroy the only man in NBL history to have 3 grand final MVPs.
See, I was thinking about
Go back and sort that out.
No doubt. There should be. And in sport, rightly or wrongly, but I lean to rightly in a game like basketball where there's 5 players on the court, your legacy is cemented by playing well and dominating huge games.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't always go back and watch game every single second of it. And you look at people's CV, and Leroy Loggins are stacked up already without what should be an extra or couple of MVPs. But the fact is that legacies can be changed by dominating big games. And his would even be more impressive by the fact that he should have 3. And how there's no retrospective already before this moment surprises me. And secondly, I know you're a part of the NBL. Were you part of the NBL Grand Final MVP voting this year?
Yeah.
And I'm legit about this. I think the exact same crew who did it should go back and watch games, or at least the NBL should commission a committee. I know they've got some other things on their mind right now, but they should at some point commission a small committee of 4 or 5, go back and watch those games and hand them out. They will be given to Leroy Loggins, but as
those 2 will be.
As a rule. Yeah, the first 2.
Yeah.
Well, the other 2.
You know, like obviously Drew is a 7-time league MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone in the future, if they want to beat, they've got to chase that, right? Bryce Cotton with 2 grand final MVPs, he should be chasing that mark of Leroy's right now.
He should be. He should be. And I think that we should go back. I think as NBL Rewind or NBL Overtime crew, we should be pushing this, and you should be a part of that panel for sure.
I got
Anything
one
else?
first thought.
Yeah, I got 1 and 2, but you go first.
The Bill Jones charge draw at the end of regulation on that man, Leroy Loggins, was arguably the biggest defensive play in NBL history.
Shot with 5 seconds left, and provided that shot drops, it is all over.
And Leroy will take
Yes!
it.
No! No, no, no!
That's a big call, and that's Leroy out of the game.
Watch it again. Leroy has the ball, and the foul is called.
Well, the foul was called on Leroy for charging. Look at Bill Jones' feet stationary, or did they move? I think people watching at home have to make up their mind for that.
Now, firstly,
this was the LeBron James block moment of the NBL.
Agreed. Now, I am chanting it because that's what the crowd broke into, because it was Leroy's 5th foul. Mm-hmm. The last minute of this regulation and then overtime was, I'm not going to say choke because some team had to win in the end, but there was a huge amount of mistakes, pressure-wise, of course, from both teams. Can I also point this out? I agree. And too often, and we're in commentary roles or in watching games and arguing about blocks and charges and all the rest of it, I've never seen a more obvious charge in the history of NBL history.
Yep.
Like,
he was
there.
Right down the numbers. Bang. And it was a beautiful play too, because he hadn't done that, jumped out as a hard show the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And in that massive moment with the game on the line, Leroy dominating, putting the team on his back and almost getting them over the line, he changes up the coverage, takes it right down the numbers, and fouls out the best player in the game. Enormous defensive play. And
even after all of that, Brisbane still got a 4-point lead in overtime and had their opportunities and go scoreless down the rest of the way. Something that struck to me, both of these teams, this doesn't always work in basketball because the game's changed a lot, but both of these teams and the makeup of the teams, I think they translate today to today's basketball quite well. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at it, we did a game a few weeks ago, that Eastside Perth grand final game. There wasn't a great deal of free shot from Perth for the entire game. They only made a couple. And these teams didn't shoot particularly well in this game from beyond the arc, but they took a lot, and it was a basis of a lot of their game plan as well as having those big boys inside. So I think both of these teams and the way they played and the teams that were put together and constructed, I think they both translate pretty well to NBL 20 and NBL 21. They had that, like, if you look at Adelaide, they had the big boys inside you touched on. Pearce and Mackay, both outstanding sharpshooters, both played for Australia, of course, from beyond the arc. So
Pearce was broke. The Iceman was broke in this game.
yeah, he didn't have a good one.
Bounce back.
He did huge in a big way.
Right.
But in saying that, I like the fact that both of these teams in 1986, we could look at them and go, you know what? I reckon this team's been put pretty well together and positionless to an extent. Have we seen Mark Davis and Larry Senstock at different times trying to break guys off the dribble from the three-point line? And of course,
but you're talking about the absolute very best.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, Sangstock, this is one of the beautiful things about going back and watching these games. Obviously, we saw him in the 94 Giants team a couple of rewinds ago. And this one, he was tough, tough. His up and under in the block was unstoppable in this game.
It did surprise me a little bit that John Dorge was the focal point. And obviously, exceptional career, again, an Australian boomer, but it's still, I was like, you know what? They're going to go to Leroy early. They're going to milk this to see how, and then just pumping it inside to John Dorge early on. There's a nice little commentary quip, which you might get to, which I'll race you later if you don't, talk about John Dorge and his shooting. But essentially, they went to him nice and early, got in some foul trouble. But yeah, they pumped it inside to the big dog.
Well, the reason is because Bill Jones and the Twin Towers were a massive problem.
Monster,
right? And we'll get to that more in a moment. But Bill Jones had a tendency, especially prior to this season, of getting in foul trouble. That was part of the reason why Ken Cole made him captain. They said, all right, you need to slow down. You need to stay on the floor. You need to be our guy out there. And he had a much better campaign in this 86 season. And as a result, but that's what Brian Curl was trying to do there with John Dorge. Roll it in, go to work, chicken farmer. Get some fouls on Bill Jones, and we can get him off the floor, and things will be a little easier for us. But that didn't work, and as a result, Jones and Davis absolutely monstered the Bullets in this game. 30-17 for Jones, 38-23. Get a load of that line from Mark Davis. They combined for 68 points. And 40 freaking rebounds in this game. And can I add?
Please.
Bill Jones was credited with 3 blocks in this game. And I think he might have had 13.
He definitely had a lot more than 3. And you mentioned him about being captain and leading the way. He was great in overtime. He was really good late, stood up, calmed them down, hit a huge mid-range jumper that tied it up. So no doubt about it. This is something I just got to go with. I actually just trying to check the time. The lotto draws at 9:06 p.m. So someone could have started this game. I'm not quite sure what the lotto was at the time of the jackpot on this particular night, but someone might have started watching this game or been part of the 11,000 strong crowd with just a couple of dollars in their pocket.
Yep.
And then at 9:06, which may have coincided with around halftime, got a couple of extra when their numbers come up. So I want to see NBL 20, which I know you have a huge part of, NBL 21. I want to see us do some lotto numbers in the commentary.
Well, truth is, everyone was actually a winner at the end of this game because the Bill Collins movie followed the broadcast.
Do we know what it was?
Silent? No, I'm not sure. Can't remember.
Okay. All right. Any other first thoughts before we get into Unsung Heroes? Because I've got about 4,000 things written down. I'm just going to sprinkle through the whole course today. Actually, for people who occasionally, and social media keyboard warriors, who occasionally aren't happy with some of the ways that we commentate NBL games, they went to a commercial break while free throws were getting shot. So I can imagine with those people who are normally nameless and don't have a photo on their social media accounts, how they would have been blowing up when Mark Davis went to the foul line and they took a quick commercial break.
Well, yes, you say that. Although, what was this? 86? So
86.
What are we? 34 years later?
34 years.
We're still cutting replays during live action.
That's right.
It can't happen.
Heroes. Unsung heroes. And it's interesting because Mark Davis was the MVP of this series and he dropped 38-23 in his game. We lost our mind when Plumlee had 21 and 17 against the Breakers we spoke about it for a month and it was a great performance. Yet Mark Davis had 38 and 23 and I'm not even certain he was sweating when this game ended.
Yeah, he was an absolute beast. You couldn't keep him off the offensive glass. He averaged 24 and 19 over the 3-game series. Double-double, a quiet double-double in the second game. 22 points and 25 rebounds in the deciding game 3. We talk about Leroy Loggins. People, I think, forget, or maybe the new fans to the league don't realize how unbelievably dominant Mark Davis was at his absolute best. And as you say, kind of under the radar a little bit. The guys involved, the coaches, the players, the fans of the Adelaide 36ers, they understood how dominant he was, but he wasn't a big, loud, brash personality like Cal Bruton or, other superstars around the league, but just got it done.
You mentioned earlier around Leroy Loggins and the fact he might be underappreciated, and Mark Davis, similar theory there. Fact is, and I thought about this, when basketball in this country went to that new level, that early 90s, mid-90s, and almost like what the golden years or whatever you want to describe them as, people like Mark Davis and Leroy Loggins were still in the league, all right? And Leroy Loggins was still going for almost another decade. They were 10 years into their NBL career by now. And I'm not saying it was the twilight and they didn't have great NBL years, but when people all of a sudden realized how cool basketball was and where NBL was going and getting more exposure, those guys had been around for a decade, been dropping 38 and 23, and they both had 38 in this game. And that's why I think, to a small extent, for the basketball junkies like you and I understand where they sit of the greats of this competition. But for the people who might have just, jumped on mid-90s when this thing went to a new level, they wouldn't have seen Mark Davis and Leroy Loggins at their absolute creme la creme. And that's why I think sometimes they're undervalued in the eyes of some of basketball fans because they don't realize how dominant they were when maybe every game wasn't live or we didn't get much basketball. There was no social media. I think that's a little bit of where that sits.
And while you're talking about kind of unsung heroes, let's circle a little bit back to Leroy Loggins because even if you go back and you give him those 3 MVPs, those 2 MVPs he missed, he ends up with 3 grand final MVPs. I mean, he was the best player in this game. He was the best player in this series. Even he wouldn't get the grand final MVP. He didn't get the grand final MVP here, but 38 points in this game, 14 of 19 from the field. Put, as Corey would say, the backpack on in the third quarter and just went to work. And a couple of players in particular, the skip pass midway through the third quarter to Ronnie the Rat Ratliff.
You know what? That is the best camera view I've ever seen of a sporting shot, basketball or otherwise, ever. It was in the perfect position.
Yeah, it was. It was nice. You got the view of the skip, the one-handed lefty whip pass across the paint, landed right in the midst of the Rat, and he tied the game at 64. And then also, Leroy brought out the hook.
Yeah, he did.
He brought out the hook midway through the fourth, and he was just in his bag as he got the bullets back in this game.
Dave Nelson, third quarter, was really, in fact, had a really good game. And, of course, the Twin Towers of Davis and Jones were huge. But his third quarter was really good. Defensively, clogged it up. And the game started to open up a little bit for Leroy Loggins. But he was also picking up those sort of scrappy, so Robert Sibley made a career of this as well, those scrappy little miss half rebounds that end up in the right hands. And he got a couple of them, got some confidence up, helped him defensively, I think, although he was a really good defensive player anyway. And it opened it up. So Dave Nelson's third quarter, while it was all Leroy Loggins, when we look at who was doing the scoring and turning this game on its head, Dave Nelson, I thought the third quarter was really, really good.
Okay, we've got one last suggestion for unsung heroes.
Yeah, I got one as well.
The commentary team.
Yes, that was hit me. What do you got?
The commentary team were pulling out some absolute pearlers throughout this game, especially down the stretch. Like the big players step up in those moments. Well, Andrew Kay, in his work, and I can't wait for people 34 years down the track to come back and get stuck in to our work in the current NBL broadcast. Go back and watch the last couple of grand finals and give me hell. But some of the pearlers from Andrew Kay down the stretch here. So Leroy was absolutely in fuego. Single-handedly dragging the bullets back into the game. Hit about 4 or 5 in a row, unstoppable at this point. And Kay comes out with this. He's certainly been in good touch. And then midway through the fourth.
This is after an MVP season, by the way. So he didn't just bob up out of nowhere.
Working on a 38-point game at that point. Midway through the fourth, tightly contested, ebbing and flowing, lead changing. whoever misses the most shots is going to lose this game. Hold on, I'm just getting warmed up.
Hang on. Have we checked the box score closely? Is that in fact turned out to be a factual comment? Because Adelaide shot better for most of it, but they might have missed more.
True. It was on 1 point game. Less than 2 minutes left. Cue Andrew Kay. This is going to be a tight one down to the wire. Yep. All tied up. 50 seconds left.
Hang on. He's just saying what we're all thinking.
What? True. True. There's no mustard on that hot dog. Let me tell you right now. All tied up. 50 seconds left. I think Adelaide need to score this time down. And that led us to his big moment. The piece de resistance of the commentary work of this ball game. Scores tied. 5 seconds left. The thing is literally running down to the buzzer. And Kay gives us, it still could go into overtime, this game. MVP.
There was a lot of good. There was a lot of, like, they were dropping knowledge from inside the Adelaide camp at different times as well. But what I really liked was just the commentary bias. Like, they were hardcore Brisbane fans, and like I'm not even against it.
The lead caller was, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, and then like when Leroy Loggins fouls out, he gives like 46 no's. and then it's like,
there was some full cheerleading type stuff.
Like, I'm yet again.
It was like you calling a Melbourne United game.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. Some of the times we get abused on social media for perceived bias, and then like they're calling players by their first name. Like, rather than send stock up and under, that's for 2. Oh, nice move, Larry.
Well, actually, that's something that jumped out to me from this game. Leroy sits in that echelon where he is just a first-name guy.
His first name.
I mean, how many of them are there? Like, I think probably Leonard maybe got to that point. Not maybe, quite close.
Well, true, but you know what? That Leonard was coached. Ray. Who was really good around this. Well, he was MVP, I think, the year before, and it was dominant for so long. Like, you're right.
It's so big, you had to say his name twice.
True, but the commentary was brilliant. I'm not being negative towards the comment. Like, there was one. I think Ray Wood hit a little half, had the fake and hit like an 18-footer sort of fake, and he's like, he was moving to his side and asking for air traffic control or something similar.
He was asking for air support.
Air support. I was like,
that was a pearler.
Brilliant.
That really was. Hey, speaking of unsung heroes, Ray Wood. What was he doing in the game in that final possession?
I don't know.
End of overtime.
I don't know.
And how did they not get a shot up? They just threw the ball away.
Well, the end of it. And you know what as well? Throws the ball away, turnover, game over. Ronnie Ratliff, gone. Didn't hang around, bolted straight out, like didn't hang around. And I think we shake too many hands in sport, in particular series. Like, I don't think we need to.
I'm with the Rat on that.
I'm just like, hey, if you want to give it like a little acknowledgement,
shake hands at the end of the series. Yeah, beat your pants off.
Yeah, but then the next step, there was a foul. Okay, and I think it was Ray Wood shot. Was it Ray Wood was shooting 2 foul shots after the buzzer? Yeah. He misses one of them. He nails one, misses. The referees get the pill, and they're gone.
Yes.
Gone.
Well, this was a period of time where there was, some court storming antics. In fact, we got some streamers fall down after the opening bucket.
But this actually reminds me.
And I love the line from the coach. It was like, that wasn't supposed to happen. That was supposed to fall on the crowd.
It actually reminded me. This happened this year in the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix Sydney Kings game. Oh. Phoenix hit a 3. And you know how sometimes they put smoke down?
Oh, yes.
And the smoke went over the actual basket.
Right.
And I think it was Jordan Hunter. It was a big guy from Kings. Went for a little jump hook in the key.
I remember
and there's smoke. All you can see smoke. So, occasionally, when you try things outside the box.
It looked like playing in China.
Yeah.
Where the cigarette smoke in the room, like you can't see the top of the backboard.
Yeah. Well, Gazy talked so well about when he played in Europe and he finishes a game and felt like he'd smoked a pack of Marlboro Reds. So, but yeah, interesting that the streamers come flying down.
We're talking about cigarettes. Strong beer vibe to this game. In fact, how beautiful were those keyways with the 4X? Just simple, beautiful West End draft for the West End Sixers.
Mate, if you're gonna talk 4X, you need to say it like this: 4X, our team, our beer, because that was the sign. That was the courtside sign, almost in front of the benches. Like, it's remarkable how things have changed and for the best. But yeah, like if you look at some of these like beers, Swan Lager, of course, with the Wildcats a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about that and how their uniform is actually export. Yeah, so in a situation where you do see a lot of that, just once unsung hero and hairlines and hairstyles. Okay, so Ronnie Ratliff, I love that dude.
Yes,
and I have no doubt that worked with the ladies, like in the mid, like not even questioning how that went. We see Jared Kenny running a much more manicured mullet nowadays, but I want to give a shout out to Jared Kenny. I actually like that, but I want to see you pull the rat out in 2021 or late 2020, and then, or even someone on the Brisbane Bullets. Like, God forbid Nathan Sobey starts running the Ratliff haircut and goes to a new level. You know what I'm saying? I want to see it. Secondly, being bald is fashionable nowadays. Like, if you're losing it, you shave it off. Like, Michael Jordan probably started it, but like Vin Diesel, these guys, it's cool. Wasn't the way in the mid-'80s. Like, you just like Cal Bruton. He's like, I don't care what grows here, but it's staying. Like, and Phil Smythe, his whole life was like this, his whole career. And I'm not even saying that I wouldn't have been the same. I'm simply saying that was the times. I was like, I'm not shaving my head if it solved world hunger. I'm going to let the last little follicles fall out, and then I'm going to move on. And I think you're seeing a little bit in this game as well.
Although there was one guy on the floor who was a little shorter up there than he had traditionally been. And we saw it in 94 as well, I like short-haired Larry Sangstock. Yeah. Much better than big, buffy, curly-haired Sangstock from like the 79 grand final.
I don't know much about what Larry Sangstock did away from the basketball court. I still don't. But it just strikes me of being a real beach guy in this particular team. Like, just like, you know what? Where's Larry? The game's on in 20 minutes. And Larry rolls in. He's got a surfboard. He's covered in sand. He has to rinse off. Brian Curl's yelling at him over the shower cubicle. Larry, we're on the call. We're in layup drill. He's like, hang on, man. I got surfboard wax on me. That could be totally inaccurate, but just feels that's watching how he looked in the time. That strikes me.
I hear you.
You know, something with Unsung Heroes?
Yes.
Something I do not miss. And I think basketballers in the NBL and all the way down to your local driveway and whatever it might be, rims that do not give you anything.
Oh, yeah.
These rims gave not much at all. Like, even Mark Davis got a couple of big dunks early in the first half. Big boy, rim didn't move. And the players knew not to hit it too hard. They threw it down, got the 2 points, and got the hell down because those rims had no give in them. And today you see rims that move around 15 times and almost allow the ballers to drop in even when you throw up a total brick.
Yeah.
But yeah, no rims. No give in those rims.
No mercy from those rims. And Mark Davis loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely loved it as he got all over the offensive glass. Things I miss. NBL music videos. Because Run for Cover, the theme song for the Brisbane Bullets in 1986 is an absolute gem.
It is.
Boom, 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 where the bullets, boom, 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 from Brisbane town. Boom, 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 where the bullets, we're gonna shoot you down. Fast break, no mistake, our mission is transition. Slam down, the big guys jump, danger to the opposition. We're the champions from the Sunshine State. We're the champions. You're looking down the barrel and it's too late. Run for cover. The bullets are running hot.
Our mission is transition is one of the best lines. And the film clip, the video, is the number 2 video in NBL music video history. On the Prowl for the Wildcats. It's top. Some good work by the Hawks a few years back with the Adam Ballinger, Tim Conrad type of crew. But this one, run for cover. We need to drop some into the post production here because this set the set. And Ronnie the Rat in this. And you talk about, was it Bill Nelson?
Dave
Nelson. His effort in game one of this series was his second best performance of the year because his work in run for cover was beautiful.
Just on music, and I know Southeast Melbourne Phoenix have brought back the brass band in NBL 20, and hopefully they continue.
Killer.
You know what they did? They dropped in the middle of the fourth quarter Sesame Street. They were playing the Sesame Street theme song. And that's it again. I know we give some challenges out to NBL 21 players and clubs and organisers and everyone who does a great job behind the scenes, but this is what needs to happen. If it's Southeast Melbourne Phoenix or another brass band around the league next year, if there's another club that does it, get the Sesame Street theme out there because it is something that just automatically, and even in these times we sit today in isolation and quarantine and you know, struggling through some dark times, it just gets you in a good mood. It's just automatic happy. Big smile on my face. And it was like, you know what? This thing needs to happen. Their
work in crunch time was also very nice. Ghostbusters.
Yes.
Came out in a big moment. And can I say, the big loud drum in perfect timing of every bounce of the ball of an opponent free throw, that was not very nicely done as well.
Yeah, I think I've told you my theory about how opposition fans and teams are too nice. Yeah, I think that we need to see more of that. I think we need to see, you know, I like the free burgers has gone a lot to getting people involved and hoping that the team miss foul shots and all the rest of it. I would like to see a little more of it going forward. Tell you what, no, I'll hold on to that one actually. But no leniency on travels in this game. Like none. Like there was a couple early that I'm like, you know what? They would have got away with this in NBL 20. And I'm not even saying...
There's no gather step rule.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe, you know what? That probably is a little bit to it. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You're upset with the travels? Okay.
Yeah, I think the travels shouldn't be called in situations where they don't really advantage the player. And there's a couple early that I was like, oh, geez, they're onto it. But you know what? Yet again, must say, fairly well refereed game.
Very well refereed game.
Okay, beyond the box score, you got anything for me?
Ian Botham and Greg Chappell.
Talking glorious hair.
We're both enjoying proceedings.
They were, and just speaking on the commentators, and then says, there's celebrities everywhere. But doesn't name really anyone else.
I know. Can we get some more shots? Yeah. I was hanging on their every word at that moment.
You know what that makes me believe?
Go ahead.
There was 11,000 people there, but there might have only been 2 celebs, both of them in Chapel. That's what I automatically think when we say the celeb. I can't look around without seeing a celeb. And then there's no more shots of them.
Mark Davis and Bill Jones, the Twin Towers. I mentioned how dominant they were in this game. Worked as security at the Adelaide Casino while playing for the 36ers. And
then when they finished, Svel Dennis and Blakemore moved on in and did the same job for 10 years. You know what? This is something maybe clubs and pubs, and when they reopen, hopefully sooner rather than later, maybe they need to get in cahoots with local basketball teams and say, look, who's your power forward and centre? Oh, it's Andrew Bogut and Joshua Tate. Or it's Miles Plumlee and we've got Nick Kay there. Well,
you just pick two guys. Just pick the 2 guys in the league, Bogut and Plumlee, who do not need to do any extra work.
No, I agree. But imagine, sometimes there's a little bit of trouble at local establishments. Someone has a bit too much to drink, or you're like, someone's looking at your girlfriend and you're like, I'm going to go up, and then you see Bogut just standing there, or Plumlee.
Well, imagine seeing the chairman of the boards. You'd have been straight back in a line, I tell you what.
I'll tell you right now, if you were stupid enough to take on Mark Davis in a verbal or a physical altercation, you deserve a 5-year ban from any local club or pub on Rundle Mall. There you go, I said it.
A 1-year-old Brad Newley was in the stands at Apollo Stadium during this series to see the 36ers take out the title.
How do you know this? Has he told you?
He tweeted this just the other day.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
I
wonder what he recollects.
I've got way more for Beyond the Box Score.
Keep going.
Can I keep going? I mentioned it before. Al Green had been selected to represent Australia at the Commonwealth Games. He was a professional sprinter.
Yeah.
He went out there and ran Bay Sheffields in South Australia. Was going to run in the upcoming Commonwealth Games, but he turned down his selection to focus solely on the 36ers and their revenge mission in 1986.
What ifs are a huge thing in sport, but I legitimately think that had they won 85, and you mentioned off the top about Ken Cole and the conversation he had with the players in the back of the bus, he wouldn't have played in 86. We may have had a different result, and he would have been in Commonwealth. And we would be talking about him in a different, maybe not a hugely different light, but he is a two-sport superstar. But when you represent your country and go to a Commonwealth Games, that solidifies it a little bit more. It'd be interesting the conversations that we would have around Al Green rather than just being such a dominant player for such a long period of time in the NBL.
The Mean Machine, I'm sure you know this. He was drafted by the San Diego Chargers. Had never played American football.
No, yeah, but
I know, pick 207.
Carl Lewis got selected by the Chicago Bulls. You know what? I would have maybe been drafted in the early 80s. Maybe. Now I'm going too far.
Man. Hey,
but you see my point.
Pay your respect. The man got drafted and said, no, I want to play ball. I'm going to find somewhere to play ball.
Fair enough, too.
And, he was a very interesting storyline in this series because he was pretty good in this game. Laid an egg. Game 2, where his good mate, Cal Bruton, came out and put 38 on the board. And there was a lot of pressure on the Mean Machine heading into Game 3. In fact, Ken Cole singled him out in the pre-game speech, telling him, you need to lead the way. They held him back on the introductions, out onto the floor, and brought him out last to build the atmosphere and the motivation. He came out and balled out, led the team in scoring, I think, got the better of Cal Bruton in that last game. And there was a vibe around him ahead of that game and ahead of this series about how he doesn't turn up in big games. And certainly that happened in Game 2. A lot of pressure, stepped up and delivered in the decider.
Well, they spoke about that in the commentary. And then apparently they used his line where he's like, at least I make it. Which I kind of chuckled at, but it's like, yeah, that kind of isn't the greatest comeback, I don't think, from a pro athlete until you stand up and dominate a grand final game, which he did a couple of games later.
And we haven't mentioned it yet, but it's maybe one of the biggest beyond the box scores in NBL history. Ken Cole, Coach of the Year, was kicked off the team and fired unceremoniously a few weeks out for the finals in a massive kind of news story in South Australia and across the NBL for smoking marijuana at the team hotel with some assistant coaches, some players, and also the traveling journalist from the Advertiser in the room. And yeah, he was like, it's medicinal. My doctor told me to smoke it. And the team revolted, basically marched in. They had a couple of games without him, marched into the front office and told them, look, you bring Ken back or we're not going to play. I think that might have been ahead of the semi-final against Newcastle. Cole comes back. The team is re-energized, goes on to win the title.
Funny that. Players, we're not going to play in the finals. All right, he's back. It's a players' league. It always has been.
But he was gone. The next year, Garrett Fox comes in. They lose to the Wildcats. And that was the end of Ken Cole's time in Adelaide.
Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. Anything before we get out of here?
Daryl Pearce, 1 from 11 in Game 1. People who just watched this game and don't know much about Daryl Pearce, the Iceman, might be like, okay, he was, but man, wrong impression. Came out, drilled 8 triples in Game 2, 6 in Game 3, and he was playing for the Boomers at this period of time. He is another guy, a little underrated across NBL history.
Mike Mackay, of course, talking another Australian Boomer, came in. He was a young Mike Mackay, and funnily enough, we had an Adelaide game a couple of weeks ago when they lost to that Giants, and he was a big part of Adelaide having a chance to run down a pretty big comeback in that particular game. He'd been the Rookie of the Year, I think, 12 months earlier. Didn't have a great grand final game when they got beat by Brisbane. Come back, had a pretty good season. What obviously was nowhere near his prime. Obviously got better as he got a little bit older. He was only 20 years of age. But Mike Mackay and Daryl Pearce, it's good in particular, Mackay, seeing a young guy, played pretty well in this game. In particular, had a little crack at Leroy Loggins a couple of times, and to be able to go and have the career he did, it was cool to go back and watch him in a big game and a big series play well.
You mentioned Nathan Sobey before. There's a little bit of a young Nathan Sobey vibe to a young Mike McKay. Very brash, big personality, kind of super confident, comes out and makes plays.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to say it again. Sobes. Ronnie the Rat Rattler. If you get that haircut going, you will be a cult hero in NBL 21. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. If you have not yet watched the game, jump on right now. Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, NBL TV, at NBL to get involved as well. Don't forget, the Adam Gibson podcast is up with Brad Newley as well. NBL Overtime from a couple of days ago is up. So wherever you get your podcast from, type in NBL podcast and they will come up. You and I will be back next week for NBL Overtime. And we're going to tell you what, I think I said this last week. Brett Rainbow is continually putting pressure on me to talk about his dunk comp. He sent me the letter the NBL sent him to invite him into the 1993 NBL dunk comp the other day, which kickstarted his run of 3 in a row. And there's an interesting story about why he couldn't go back to his 4th. So we might do a mini NBL rewind around the dunk comps and Rainbow. But good one too. We spoke a little bit last week around Aaron Trahair and that under 20 or that 23 and under Australian team. See, Chris Anstey's starting to do some work on his own Facebook page.
We should get into that game.
I think we've got to get into, I reckon, the tournament more so than, because there are so many moving parts into that
semi-final
tournament. Just want to do the Argentina game?
Yep.
Okay, then we'll do that. Watch Manu Ginobili with hair, which is also very weird. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. We will see you for NBL Overtime next Tuesday. Gotcha.